Bases dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down Here. It's a Monday. It's June 8th. It's not quite an overreaction Monday, but if you've got overreactions, go ahead and throw them at us on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. There's lots of stuff to talk about. U.S. Soccer Federation has reportedly going to reconsider their national anthem policy. We'll get into that. We will get into everything from the Bundesliga, from La Liga, from the Premier League. La Liga is back this week. Lionel Messi is back to training as well after a couple little nagging injuries kept him out. He is expected to play on the weekend. The Premier League is getting closer. They're not quite there yet, about a week and a half away. The Bundesliga had another week of play and stuff from around the world as well. John, where do you want to start?
Let's start domestic and the news out of the U.S. Soccer Federation.
Well, it's not news. Let's be very clear here. This is not news. Jeff Carlisle is reporting at ESPN that the U.S. Soccer Federation Board of Directors is considering the possible repeal of its policy requiring national team players to stand during the national anthem. That's according to multiple sources of Carlisle's. If you go back, this policy was created when Megan Rapinoe took a knee during the national anthem after Colin Kaepernick did in the NFL. Rapinoe said that she was doing it in solidarity with Kaepernick's stance. The Federation then passed the policy that players had to stand, and she's followed that policy as everyone else has as well. Cindy Parlow-Cone, according to Carlisle, is urging this conference with the board. They will meet on Tuesday via conference call to discuss the policy. Probably a formal vote on Friday from Carlisle's article over at ESPN. Spokesperson for the United States Soccer Federation did confirm that a repeal of the policy is under consideration. The U.S. Soccer Federation Athlete Council, which is represented on that board of directors by U.S. Paralympian Chris Aarons, former U.S. internationals Lori Lindsay and Carlos Bocanegra, they discussed the possible repeal on Sunday during a conference call, according to Carlisle's sources. So that conference call, again, Tuesday, probably not going to be a formal vote until Friday. When you follow these protocols and bylaws and things with U.S. Soccer, the board of directors can pass a policy, then it has to be enacted at the next general meeting, which will be coming up down the road. They could actually repeal the policy that the board of directors sets. It's very rare that happens, but it is possible. Not really a surprise here. Again, this is a new president. This is a new CEO with the U.S. Soccer Federation and a new situation right now. And this kind of follows along the conversations in all sports at the moment. So not a surprise. It is a little different in that it is a national team as opposed to a league of individual teams. It's a little bit different situation. That was maybe what gave the Federation a little more cover to do what they did when Rapinoe started to kneel. Still don't think it's going to hold up, especially now. Probably a bad idea then, and it's an even worse idea now, and this thing's going to get repealed, I think.
Yeah, and Carlisle ended the piece just saying that Cindy Parlow-Cone has received enough support from board members to be optimistic on the repeal, not knowing off the top where board members of the Youth Council, Adult Council, Pro Council, and the independent directors would vote. But once again, the confidence is there that this will get repealed.
Yeah, and again, it's a board policy that would get repealed first. Then you're dealing with the whole group and all that, but that's down the road. There's not going to be any games in between those two things, most likely. So we will see what happens with this. I'm sure it's going to get some debate going. Again, and it's a national team. It is a different conversation to a degree than a club team. It's a little more complicated because of that. I still think the policy was not really the best approach to deal with it before, and it's not going to stand now. There's just no way that's going to work at this point. So as we're seeing, the NFL, I retweeted it this morning. I highly recommend, if you get a chance, go read the Peter King article. His, what is it, Football Morning in America? Is that what he calls it?
Yes. Yeah.
Really good behind the scenes of how the NFL has addressed its stances and its actions in recent days. And it's great reporting by King, first off, and he's got more sources than anybody when it comes to the NFL. But the way he kind of wove this together in real time as it happened with all of the different situations, that the NFL is now changing its stances. And if the NFL is going to change its stance on these things, the U.S. Soccer Federation has to. They can't look outdated by not doing it. I don't know if they would have if the NFL progress hadn't happened. There's no way to know that kind of stuff now. And I think we get bogged down in, well, you're doing this because of this and this because of that. Is it the right thing? Let's do the right thing. Let's get the right things done. And this would be the right thing. And that's where we're at. So go check that Peter King article out, though, for a bigger picture on where things stand. NWSL, I want to talk about this real quick as well. As they've put together their plans for their Challenge Cup, and they're still kind of finalizing a few details here, they consulted early on with the mothers in the league, players who have young children. And that was a big part of creating the competition schedule and the way this was all going to work. The Associated Press had this article, Ann Peterson, and caregivers will be there on site to be able to help with childcare. It's just kind of hard if you're going to be in a quarantine-ish kind of situation and you have an 8-year-old, as some of them do. They're like, these kids are going to be bouncing off the wall, so I'm going to need a little bit of help dealing with this.
Yes.
So Lisa Baird, the new commissioner, has been working with the mothers in the league early on to make them feel comfortable about this. And again, this is an entirely optional event on the NWSL side, so players still might choose to opt out, but they are trying to make it as comfortable as possible for players who have kids and will have kids with them in Utah at this. And as we're seeing, this is going to come up, I think, for quite a while. There in Utah right now, there was a spike in numbers on coronavirus positive cases over the weekend. And a lot of people said, well, now should they not do the NWSL event? I think we have to understand these are two different worlds that we're dealing with in this. The NWSL players will not be, especially if they're following the protocols that are being recommended and just following common sense about their situations, they're not going to be running around in Utah without masks on, without paying attention to the coronavirus. They're going to be tested consistently. Again, it's very different. I don't know if the NWSL has actually published their testing schedules and protocols yet and how much they will test. Will it be twice a week, like what most leagues are doing? Will it be every other day, like MLS? Is it going to be less than that? That's going to play into it, and that's the question that I have about it. Not that in Utah there was a spike, I think, over 500 positive cases this weekend, or one of the days this weekend.
Yeah.
It's more than they've had, but does that mean there's going to be an outbreak where the NWSL players are who are following more protocols to stay safe than your average person? Incredibly unlikely. And that's where I think we do have to understand what's realistic and what's not. We've seen the conversation, and this is also going to continue in college sports. College teams are having players back to campus. I think UGA is starting workouts today. Other SEC schools are starting workouts today, and Alabama had, I think, 5 positive tests. Others are having positive tests. But again, what does that mean? Does it mean that you can't do anything? No. It means that you're testing. It means that you're identifying. It means that you're pulling that person out of the group. You're not going to have the spread in your group, and you move on from there. The problem would be, and this is what the conversation needs to be, in my opinion. The problem would be if you have 0 positive tests week 1, week 2, week 3. Then you have 2. Then you have 6. Then you have 12. That's the problem. And that hasn't happened anywhere that there's testing and there's team sports. That has not happened. You've had numbers coming in that have been higher than they were in week 2, in week 3, in week 4, in week 5, and you're not having big increases. That's what's important here, and that's what we have to understand. But again, you're being able to identify that because you're doing the testing. So, NWSL, that's one question that I have, is what the testing will look like. I'm not worried about things in the whole state of Utah affecting the NWSL. I don't have the detail on the numbers in Utah, first off. Is it all in Salt Lake City? Is it in Sandy? Is it spread around the state? We don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure those numbers are out there, but again, these players are not your average person walking the streets without a mask, without anything, without, thinking about hygiene, without any of that. No, these are professional athletes that know if they catch it and they bring it back into their team, they could get their whole team sick, and nobody wants to do that. So that's where we're at with all of this. There's going to be a lot of different narratives and storylines going on right now, and at times it can get very complicated, and we're trying to push through some of it and just make sure we're focusing on what's the real issues here. And there's plenty of them. There's absolutely plenty of them. But we can't get distracted by some of the scary things out there as well, because these players are not going to be put in those situations. That's the whole point of all the safety protocols.
Yep, and there are a bunch of different places that are posting numbers, and there are a lot of different places that are saying one thing, that one trend is this, the other trends are this. But just remember that the athletic events are undergoing their own separate set of rules, ideas, protocols, etc., to make sure that those are going to be done as successfully and as healthily, I guess, for that to be the adverb, to have things as healthy an environment as possible. So just keep an eye.
Mindful of health. Do we want to go with that instead of healthily?
Sure, why not? Sounds good. Mindful of health as humanly possible. There you go.
Yeah. Now, where these kinds of numbers can affect, especially pro sports and sports that charge people to come into the building and buy a ticket, it's going to be that. It's going to be the attendance. That's the point that is the concern. When I hear that numbers in Utah have gone up, I don't think about the players. I'm not thinking about the players. I'm thinking about the things that were said about a limited number of fans being allowed to come in. That's where the question comes up, because the fans coming into the building are not being tested in the same way as players are. There's no obligation from the teams to be able to test their fans. I mean, that's just, you can do the temperature checks when they come in. They can say whatever on a questionnaire, but can you actually do a test to see if they are carrying COVID-19? I don't know. I don't know if teams are going to be able to mandate that as part of attending an event. But right now in Utah, that would be my fear, is that, okay, if you're trying to get some people in the building and there's an increase in numbers there, that might not be a good idea. Yeah. And where you hear about increases in numbers, I think it can slow down that process of having fans in the stands. And not because I think fans being in the stands are going to get players sick or personnel sick. No, they could get security staff sick. They could get stewards sick. They could get that kind of group sick. But they could also contribute to a spread. And that's the issue. So that's where my questions come up around this. It's not about the safety of the players. You can play behind closed doors. You can follow all of these protocols. They are established. We've seen them work in different countries around the world. It's where there's a spike in positive tests in a community, I think it slows down the process of fans being in the stands for these events. That's my concern.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely right there with you. It is the interaction of the two subsets, and where that...
No, it's not the interaction of the two subsets. No.
What?
No, the players are not going to be interacting with the fans.
But what I'm saying is that where the fans come into venues and they're interacting with themselves, you have the players over on the one side doing their thing, the fans on the other side doing their thing, and have the fans a part of the venue is what I'm saying. So where you have...
Yeah, but it's not interaction of subsets. I want to make that clear, that I'm not worried about fans coming in the building getting players sick or getting coaches sick. I'm worried about fans coming to the building and getting each other sick.
Right.
Because you can't do the same testing. It's the whole point. If you're doing the testing on the players, the players can feel comfortable playing because people are testing negative and they can play and you can interact. Fans are not testing, so that's the question. But we'll see how all this goes. A ton of different things to get to around the world. Where do you want to go first, John?
Since it's a Monday, can we start with some really cool news before we get into the other news?
You're in charge.
Wait, okay. The news that came out of our friends at Aberdeen, I thought was really cool over the weekend. With the launch,
and that's a watermelon Red Bull, by the way.
Just checking. Aberdeen launching their Thrive app to help supporters' mental health. The story from the BBC, which I thought was really cool.
Tell us about it.
Okay, well, I will tell you about it.
Settle down.
Aberdeen say that they've seen some really strong uptake, their words, of their recently launched mental health app. The Thrive app is part of the club's efforts to engage with the community in the city and beyond during lockdown. Commercial director Rob Wicks told BBC Scotland Aberdeen are the first professional football team in Scotland to offer the service, able to make it available to 10,000 season ticket holders and their AberDNA members. And Wicks continued by saying, we started with a series of calls to everybody who is over the age of 70, deemed to be in the most vulnerable group on our season ticket database. And we've covered that story in the past. That led to several arms and legs growing out of the Still Standing Free campaign, which was spread into the community with food deliveries in the most needy parts of Aberdeen. And so now this NHS, National Health Service approved app features more than 100 hours of content designed to help people relax in stressful situations. It was created in conjunction with the club's well-being partner Health Shield. And Wicks says it's something very important for the longer-term mental aspect of the challenges we've been facing in recent times. Used on a regular basis, the app's designed to try and help people live happier and more stress-free lives. And I thought that was just very, very cool.
Yeah, Health Shield tweeted out earlier this morning. It said, as Aberdeen's health and well-being partner, we're proud to offer the club supporters free access to a mental well-being app with our partners, Thrive Apps UK, to help keep them in the best of health during these difficult times. And Aberdeen also sending thanks to Health Shield UK and everything about it. So Aberdeen, I think, has really been one of the best clubs in the world at dealing with this, as John is dancing or something. What was that, John?
Pop-ups are us.
You do know there's a mute button on your computer that you could hit right now that would probably help the listeners and me from losing their minds.
Hitting that right now.
Yeah,
of course, you don't know which websites don't get which ones.
No, you don't need to worry about websites. You just hit the mute button, it mutes them all, because you're kind of doing a show. Yeah, I'm just saying. It's an idea. Just a thought. Ay, Dios mío. Okay, so Aberdeen's doing as good as anybody in the world when it comes to this. Across the board and in a lot of different ways. And that's been really impressive to see just Aberdeen do this, but also with all the connections to, everything going on here in Atlanta, whether it's Stephen Glass, whether it's the relationship with Atlanta United, Darren Eales being on the board. It makes you feel good about a club finding a way to, I think, still innovate in a time like this where, they're struggling financially and there's a lot of questions about what happens in Scotland in the long term. They're still finding a way to provide value to their supporters, and that's a very, very cool thing to see.
You want to go nationally in the European theater with Gianni Infantino and salary caps, or the idea that Champions League might be headed to Lisbon?
You pick one. Go for it.
All right, so let's go with Lisbon. Let's go with matchups reaching the conclusions in August and possibly heading to Lisbon, since Istanbul isn't a fan of not doing matches without any fans.
Well, yeah, because they'd make no money. So,
yeah.
I mean, I get it. Bild in Germany reported on Saturday that the final and now the semifinals, which could be single game, which UEFA has been exploring, could be in Lisbon. According to Bild, there's also an unnamed city in Germany that's interested. Moscow has expressed an interest, but according to Bild, UEFA is not interested in Moscow because of those high rates of COVID-19, which makes you wonder if they are potentially considering a small number of people in the stands for these games in Lisbon. I don't know what Turkey's situation is with coronavirus, but if they're saying they don't want to have it if there's no fans in the stands, and they're thinking about going to Lisbon, maybe that opens up a possibility for fans in the stands in Portugal at the end of August. It's a good bit of time down the road. You're talking 2.5 months now down the road. Well, who knows? We could see. But if Istanbul does not want to do this, then yeah, you got to find something else. And if you're going to create a situation where you're going to do the semifinals in one game, which I think you're going to have to because of the timing of everything, you might have to do the quarterfinals in one game. But if you do a Final Four situation and you bring 4 teams together to do this and play the semifinals midweek and play the final on the weekend, I mean, you could create a scenario where in UEFA's programming, you have semifinals for the Champions League on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. You have the Europa League final on a Thursday, and you have the Champions League final on a Saturday. That's a pretty good way to spread things out, get maximum coverage for it, and really try to blow this up as an end to the current season. If Lisbon is the place that can do that, I wonder if they'll do the same for the Europa League and where that might be, because I would imagine they'd probably model the same type of format.
Miguel Delaney and our friends at The Independent are saying that the German city is Frankfurt that is being part of the possibilities, and it is looking like the UEFA setting a working group on the problem set to inform the final decision for the meeting on June 17th. So that's what we're looking at when it comes to the end of the blitz of European competition, as Miguel says, in the final 2 weeks of August, or 2 weeks in August.
It's going to get funky. I mean, it's going to have to, because you're going to run out of time to get everything done and get ready to move into the next year, which is going to be vital, because that transfer window is going to be vital for a lot of teams that need to sell players to balance the books. They need to get into that window as soon as possible.
What was this about Gianni Infantino and salary caps?
Well, I mean, this has been coming up everywhere right now, and Joe Prince Wright at the NBC had a piece about it, but it's been talked about a lot of places. Where we're at with FIFA right now. So Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA, has proposed talks with leagues around the world about possibly implementing a salary cap, possibly limiting transfer fees. He released a video statement on Saturday, and in that statement, he asked league associations to work together to find the best solutions for the club and international calendar going forward. He's also working with FIFA on a financial package that they hope to discuss with members and finalize in their next council meeting later in June. That's a separate topic. So a couple things Infantino said in this video statement to members of FIFA. He said, I also heard some interesting proposals on a wide range of topics, from salary caps to transfer fee caps or other taxation mechanisms, to the possible obligation for governing bodies, competition organizers, and clubs to build reserves or to contribute to a reserve fund which can be of assistance in hours of need such as now. I personally advocate for clearer and stricter financial regulations, imposing full transparency and good governance principles, and not only limiting this to the transfer system, but to the entire football ecosystem. FIFA is doing already a lot of work on this area, even if we face some strong vested interests who fight against our plea for a better global governance in our sport. Look, I totally understand the mentality of, yeah, whatever, FIFA, haha. If you're ever gonna change these things, now is the time, because you're facing something that we've never seen before. FIFA's never seen anything like this before in the modern era. Clubs haven't, leagues haven't, nobody has. So, yeah, FIFA's done a lot of stupid things in the past, and FIFA's been all about the money in the past. And they will always be all about the money, because they can be a nonprofit. You can call it a nonprofit all you want. It's a business. We know this. Can they still be more responsible? Yeah. Can they be more transparent? Can they have good governance principles? Can they do these things that they're talking about? Yeah, they can. And you got to hold them accountable. And if they're going to say they're going to do them and they announce a plan to do them, then yeah, hold them accountable to actually doing it. But are they maybe considering some things that they never considered in the past? Yeah. Because what are they facing? They're facing a lot of issues with the worldwide calendar, just from a logistics standpoint, because they've got World Cup qualifying to get done, and they're not going to have as much time to do it as they did before. They are facing the potential losses at the club level, which trickles up to the league level, which trickles up to the confederation level, which trickles up to FIFA. They are facing losses like everybody else is. And does that make them potentially consider some different ways of doing business? Yeah, it should. I mean, it'd be foolish not to. Does it mean they do it? Does it mean they do it the right way? No. But if they're talking about it, keep pushing. Keep pushing to do this the right way. I mean, I don't know what the best solution is, because can FIFA implement a global salary cap? Like, would that even make sense? I don't know if it does. Would FIFA be able to create a transfer fee cap worldwide? I don't know if they can, really, because what happens in Europe is very different than what happens in CONCACAF. What's different than what happens in Africa? I mean, it's kind of hard for FIFA to do that. Can FIFA create a situation where clubs need to build a reserve for themselves or a solidarity fund? Yes, they can do that. They can definitely do the solidarity fund through FIFA. And they have one. I'm not sure exactly how they feed into it. I would assume from FIFA events. Could it be bigger than that? Could it be certain clubs at certain levels contribute more? Potentially. And I think that's where FIFA's sweet spot is. I don't know if FIFA can dictate to UEFA what their salary cap would be. I think that's a UEFA thing, and probably more realistically, that's a league-by-league thing. Can they advocate for it? Can they push for it? Can they explain why they think it'd be a good idea? Absolutely. I don't think FIFA can mandate that. FIFA can create a solidarity fund worldwide, and they have one, but can they expand it? Can they make it bigger? Can they come up with a way to force bigger clubs to contribute to the good of the game? That's one I would be in favor of. That's one I would be in a lot of favor of, if they can find the way to do that where it doesn't hurt big clubs because they're big, but it makes big clubs consider the bigger picture. Because big clubs need the bigger ecosystem too. They can't just survive on their own in isolation. They need that grassroots element. They need those smaller clubs. So if this is going to make them contribute to help smaller clubs, that's where I think FIFA should focus. That's where I think their best thing is. If they want to lobby for other things, I think it's lobbying. I don't think they can mandate it, but they can create a bigger, better solidarity fund.
You mentioned UEFA, and did you hear the news this morning? I'm guessing this morning, early hour time, about Liga 1. And
no, what's new with Liga?
According to the Daily Mail, our friends at the Daily Mail, Catherine Batt for the Daily Mail Online, France's Ligue 1 season could resume despite being prematurely ended in April, with playoffs used to crown the champs and decide relegation, according to UEFA.
Yeah, we've talked about this. They have had multiple cases in front of the French courts from the clubs that were voted to get that were going to get relegated because the league stopped and decided to have promotion relegation. Lyon has pushed forward cases as well. They've pushed a lot of it, and there's been a good bit of evidence that, obviously I think one bit of evidence is Germany is back underway. England is going to be back underway on the 17th. La Liga is back underway on Thursday. Other smaller leagues around them are back underway, and France might have acted a little too soon. And by doing that, they've affected the business of some of their clubs, and some of their clubs have pushed back. And even Aulas from Lyon has said that your judgment that you used to do this, why you said you were doing it about UEFA and their calendar, isn't accurate. That's incorrect, that the information that you used to make the decision. So this has been going on. I don't know if it's going to happen, and we'll have to wait and see if this gets actually done. But yeah, there's cases that are being heard right now that I don't think they have the time to actually come back and finish the whole season. But could they come back and have to do some kind of a playoff, some kind of a mini competition for the teams that could get relegated, for the teams that are trying to play their way into Europe? Could they have to figure out a way forward to do right by those teams? Yeah, I think they could. But, I mean, if you just look at the timeline, like if right now they come back, let's say today the courts come back and say, yeah, you can't do that. Well, you're going to need a month at least to ramp up in training. You're not going to be playing games until July 9th or 10th, and UEFA's trying to have leagues finished by the end of July. There is some flexibility there because they want to finish their competitions in August. But can you do all that and get a whole season in? No, I don't think you can. But can you come back and finish the season in a more equitable way? Yeah, you have the time to do that. And we'll see if the courts rule in that way, because then that's going to create a whole trigger of different things that is going to be very difficult for French football to deal with.
Yes, Alexander Sefrin came out with a communication over the weekend. We would first of all like to clarify it's the competence of national associations to decide on the format of their domestic competitions, in particular by taking into account the circumstances and restrictive measures specific to the country. As mentioned by UEFA a few weeks ago, the French authorities' decision to cancel the season was taken relatively early. Like as you just said, nevertheless, continuing his statement, and provided that the national associations are able to coordinate with the competent national authorities, a potential restart of domestic competition August 2nd, 2020 would be an appropriate date to end the domestic competitions.
Yeah, which would not give them time to finish the whole season that they have left, but it would give them time to do better than what they've done. But UEFA can't tell France, like, yes, you have to let them play. UEFA, right. I mean, Sefrin's being very careful in the way he's wording that. He's making it clear that UEFA, I think, would like for them to do something as opposed to just drawing it into the season and having it end the way that it did. We'll see what happens. But Sefrin's not making the decision here. This is going to be down to the French courts because the government has said repeatedly, we're not changing it. We're going to stay where we're at, and you're not going to play. The courts are going to have to overrule that.
Folks are hopping in on the Twitters this morning.
What do we have?
Nathan Pugh is bringing stuff to the table early on. He says, rugby union competition in New Zealand announced this morning that fans will be allowed this weekend with no caps on max attendance. Logistics are obviously very different in New Zealand, but is there anything in the language for MLS and Orlando about potentially having fans?
These are completely different situations. New Zealand has no active cases. Zero. Like, none. Like, not even a small number, not a decrease, zero. So why wouldn't they have people in the stands? Orlando, Florida, the United States, has active cases. And that's why you can't have fans in the stands. There's been no talk about fans in the stands. There won't be. I don't think that's going to happen in Orlando at all. I think that would be reckless. Completely and utterly reckless. So in terms of New Zealand as a whole, they had 1,500 confirmed cases, 22 deaths for the whole outbreak. They have 0 active cases. They're still encouraging social distancing. They are not allowing non-residents to come into the country right now. No, they had to quarantine for 2 weeks when they arrive. There is no active cases, no positive cases in the last 17 days. Not even just like, they just had a day where they had no cases. They haven't had a new case in 17 days. There's no one receiving treatment. There's been 40 days since the last case of community transmission. New Zealand's also a little bit smaller. It's a little bit easier to handle these things in New Zealand. They've handled it, so they can get back to normal. Orlando can't. You can't compare the two, and you can't. There's just no way you can. The concern's actually the other way in Florida, that there could be an increase in cases, and we'll see. One thing that jumped out to me, I think I keep going round and round on this because people are stuck in their sides of it, and it doesn't make any sense to me because, I mean, it's obvious there's a problem. Businesses don't shut down. Things don't happen the way they did if there's no problem. We know there was a problem. We know there is a problem. Okay. You can debate how you want to handle it a lot of different ways, and that's fine. That's what debate is. That's what people who make policy have to do. They have to weigh the different risks. Yeah, there's a health issue with this. That's undeniable at this point. There's a financial issue with this. That's also undeniable at this point. And you have to find the way to move forward in a different situation. I think leagues that are playing games behind closed doors and are doing all the protocols to keep their players and staff safe, that's adapting to the current situation. It's not all or nothing on this stuff. It can't be, and we can't think that way anymore. We've got to understand that, there are things you have to face. It's just New Zealand is a different situation than the United States. Germany's a different situation than the United States in terms of where the virus is in Germany right now. Spain and England are in different situations. England's maybe more of a question mark, but they're finding a way to do this because they're creating an environment for their players where they are testing a lot. They have not had outbreaks. You had one positive test in the championship over the weekend. You had 0 in the last round of Premier League testing. So across the 2 leagues, over 3,000 tests, you had 1 positive. Those numbers have gone down steadily since you started testing. That's good. That means players are following the instructions that they're being given to avoid risk, and you're not seeing any spread within a team environment. These things are all good. Doesn't mean you can have fans in the stands right now. Doesn't mean that because New Zealand does, you can't hear. Like, there's different situations. We have to be cognizant of it. We have to understand it. Turner Kirby with a point about it, and this is something that I've seen and people are starting to speculate on. The number of cases worldwide has increased, but the worldwide deaths, the percentages are decreasing. Some of that could be because a couple of things. The spread is still early in some countries where it's increasing, and you're not seeing the deaths that generally come later. That was how it went here. You saw a big increase in cases first, and then deaths started to happen when people caught it who were vulnerable. The other thing, too, that I think we could be seeing here more, and I've read a few things about it. It is speculation because there's no way to study it yet. Is it maybe the positive tests that are happening in countries like the U.S. and other countries that have had it for a while that have made it adaptations to protect vulnerable populations? Are the new positives coming from younger folks, coming from healthier folks who are testing positive and can spread it, and that needs to be understood. There's multiple layers to this, but they're not at as much risk of getting very sick. It's positive tests, but it's positive tests that don't have the dire outcomes that some of the earlier positives did when there wasn't any thought about vulnerable populations. Maybe that's some of it. That wouldn't surprise me at all. It makes sense when you start to think through it logically, like, okay, it's spreading, but you're protecting people who could have been at big risk now. That's happening here, and that's good. And people who catch it can handle it more right now, and that's good too. But the other thing about that, and you have to remember this, is they can still spread it. And they can still spread it to people who can't handle it. And that's what you do have to be cognizant of. That's why we can't just lump all this together and be laissez-faire about it. In a situation where there's still a spread, do you want to have a large event where a virus could spread through? Maybe not a good idea at the moment. Maybe in 2 months it's a better idea. If you have a player who tests positive, that's a bad thing. You isolate them because you have staff, you have coaches who are older who could be at risk. You have other players who could be at risk. You have players who can play with asthma, for example. Having asthma and catching something like this is not good, and you have to be very careful. And sometimes you have an underlying condition that you don't know about, and that's another element to it. So, look, it's all complicated, and that's why people are being careful. Being careful is not a bad thing. Also, you have to be realistic, and that's why you're finding ways to get back to business and get back to action, because, yeah, the financial implications of this are severe. You have to weigh all of it. It can't be, well, no, somebody went out of business, so we can't do anything about spreading a virus. If it happens, it happens. That's foolish. That's silly. And it can't be because there is a virus that is coming down, we think, and being handled better, we think, that we shut everything down and nobody can leave the house. That's not realistic either here. You have to find the balance in the way to move forward. And stop yelling at each other about it. Seriously. Just be smart. Weigh the risk and handle it. And that's what these leagues and these businesses have to do. That's what all of us have to do.
Rich Ransom in this morning, he has two questions. One, if MLS needs fans as bad as they do and are thinking about letting fans back in, would away support be allowed?
I don't think they're thinking about it, first off. I don't think they're thinking about it anytime soon. They need it. And look, if there was any league that would do everything possible to push for it, it would be MLS, because they have the most need when you start looking at the percentage of revenue. But there hasn't really been any talk about it being likely at this point. Could it happen when games are played in markets? Sure. The away fan part of it, I don't think that's a big issue yet, because you're not even thinking about it yet, and you don't have. I'm trying to think. I mean, you'd have to start comparing all the numbers across the league. Would Utah, who, again, has generally handled this pretty well, they had low number of cases until very recently, would they say, well, we don't want anybody to come in here and spread it if you're coming from an area that's had it? There was a lot of talk early on, and this has subsided, about limiting travel to certain parts of the country. I don't know if anything was ever actually enacted to prevent it. There was a lot of recommendation. There was a lot of chatter about it, a lot of threats about it too. I don't know if anything actually ever happened where they said, no, you can't do this. No, you can't come into our county. We have, police at the border of the county. Yeah. We're not letting you in. I don't think that's going to happen. So no. I don't know if they could actually do anything about that, Rich, but I don't think they're too far along in the thought process about what bringing fans in the stands looks like yet either. I think the NFL and I think college football are going to be the ones that are going to drive that. And I hope that they are using the same care that they have in other things right now about this. I hope that they're not going to be risky with it. Because if they are, other leagues are going to feel like they have to, and you have to be careful with it. Turner said that there's some evidence showing asthma is really low on the list of risk factors. I've seen both. Just like about anything with this, I mean, who knows? Because we're all figuring it out. I mean, it turned from at one point to the whole thought about it being a blood issue as well as a respiratory, or some people it affects the blood. It's a scary thing, and I don't think anybody's looking forward to catching it if you haven't caught it. I mean, some of the stories about people who have survived it, it's not going to be pleasant if you get it. So it's just, we don't know. And when you don't know, you got to be careful. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
And I know that also this morning, his second question, will get into the Bundesliga in a little bit and crappy ghost games and things like that. But his second question is more of a statement. He says, Robert Lewandowski is the most underrated / best player in the world. Prove me wrong.
If he was playing in England or with Real Madrid or Barcelona, he would be considered that. Playing in Germany, it's not looked at in the same way. It's not fair. Bayern is one of the biggest clubs in the world. But, yeah, he's looked at differently. He's also not as flashy as like a Cristiano Ronaldo. He's not a Lionel Messi. He's a very different kind of player. Just a flat-out goal scorer. And maybe people just aren't paying as close attention to what he's doing. But the year he's having, it's one of the best seasons ever. It's on that kind of list. He's a player that any team in the world would love to have. He's a player that can do a lot more than, and he's not just a goal scorer, but that's what he does best. And he's not going to do some of the things that give you a YouTube highlight or give you a viral video. He's just going to find the back of the net, and he's really good at it. And I do really believe that if he was in a higher profile league, not a better league, but a higher profile league, or at a Real Madrid or a Barcelona, which are the highest profile teams, period, then you're having a different conversation about him.
There was also something that I had seen involving Lewandowski this past weekend. He's never won a Ballon d'Or, right?
No.
Yeah. So I mean,
But okay. Again, you say that like that's a huge shock and an insult. There is a player that.
Yeah, I've heard of a couple. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's others who have popped up too. So, I mean, that's and. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. This year could be different because of the year he's had, but to say that he's never won one before, and that's a horrible thing.
Competition's pretty stiff.
Not in the age of Lionel Messi, it's not. And Cristiano Ronaldo would have won a whole bunch if Messi wasn't around, and every once in a while you get a Luka Modric or you get somebody else pop up and win one, but those are in Messi and Ronaldo, it's two of the best players we've ever seen. And Lewandowski is an amazing player, but those are two world all-time legends that are going to win that award. Also, where have they been playing? They've been playing for more high-profile teams. So that also has part to do with it. It's not a knock on Bayern. It's not a knock on Bayern at all. It's just the general population is going to look at Real Madrid, Barcelona, or the Premier League, especially the general English-speaking population, maybe the best way to put it.
Right.
And that's who they're going to look at for that level of excellence. Cristiano, I think, carries some of what he had from Manchester United and then Real Madrid to Juventus. But, yeah, if he was at Juventus, if he didn't go to Real Madrid first, he would be more in that conversation with Lewandowski because he would be overlooked a little bit more. But he was at Real Madrid, and he won 3 Champions Leagues in a row. So, he's got that going for him.
All right, since we're in the Bundesliga, what are your Bundesliga notes? Because I have a comment about crappy ghost games, and I have Emre Can going and telling his teammate Jadon Sancho to grow up.
Well, what's the crappy ghost games comment first? Oh, hold on. What's the grow up comment first?
Okay. From our friends at the Mirror, Emre Can tells Borussia Dortmund teammate Jadon Sancho to grow up over the lockdown breach.
Are we still talking about this?
Apparently so.
Well, why are we? It's not even a big deal.
Let's see. Was Sancho?
He
10 grand.
From what we know, he didn't leave the country. I think that's been understood now, right? He had the barber come in, right?
I thought they left. I thought they took a private jet to the barber.
Okay, I don't know. And then he took a private jet to the barber. The players said that they had the masks on while they did the haircut, and they took them off for the picture. The club said, "Well, we think they should be more careful, more thoughtful." They fined him 10 grand. Okay. Jadon Sancho sent out a tweet saying that this was garbage or whatever. He was mad about being fined. What else is there to talk about here? Emre Can said, grow up, because why? Because he went to get his hair cut, or because he's complained about being fined, or both?
I think it has to do with the fine.
Are we? Oh no, hold on. Who is reporting this?
This is our friends at the Mirror,
and the Mirror is reporting this specifically about Jadon Sancho.
Yes.
The barber came to Dortmund. Okay, that's what I thought I had read.
Okay.
So, thank you, Johannes. We know to get our true German news from Johannes.
Yes.
And sorry, I'm not dissing Bayern. Don't come at me. Don't hit me when I see you. That's what I thought. So, okay, the barber comes there.
Okay.
It's stupid. It's a fine. But who's talking trash about Jadon Sancho to try to keep this going? The Daily Mirror. Are they maybe a little salty that one of the top young English players left England and went to the Bundesliga? Are they just trashing a top English player because that's what generally the English media does? It's a non-story.
Here's how it's being reported.
Yeah.
So DFL fines Akanji and Sancho 10 grand. Sancho labels the DFL's decision, quote, an absolute joke in a tweet aimed at the governing
not
body.
Not garbage, a joke. Okay. Aimed at the league.
At the governing body, which was later removed.
Okay.
Then, now Emre Can feels it was an unnecessary mistake for his teammate to make, suggested the incident shows Sancho still has some maturing to do.
Why is Emre Can talking?
He was talking to Sky in Germany. I don't know why specifically.
Why is he talking?
That's the question.
Why is he slamming a teammate over something stupid, first off? And why is he slamming a teammate publicly over something stupid?
Yeah.
Emre Can, if you want to say that to him privately, fine. Whatever. That's team business. Y'all handle it. But to go to the media to say that? Come on, man. Seriously?
He tells Sky in Germany, quote, Jaden needs a little guidance. He's a great boy. Also off the pitch, it's true that I get along very well with him. He just has to be a little bit smarter about these things. Everyone needs a hairdresser. He needs to grow up. He can't afford to make mistakes like that in the future. We as a team are also responsible. We are not annoyed by him. We know that he has to be more disciplined in some things, but he knows that too.
Emre Can should probably keep that within the locker room. If he wants to be Mr. Team Unity guy, you don't trash players publicly over something dumb. This is dumb. This shouldn't even be a story anymore. He got fined. He didn't like getting fined. He deleted the tweet complaining about getting fined. Big deal. He had mask on or he didn't have a mask on. He took a picture. He shouldn't have taken a picture. It was dumb. He got fined. What else do you want out of this? It's a non-story. And Emre Can, what's turning it into a story, is him going to the media to trash a teammate. You want to know what I think happens? Emre Can's going to be looking for another club very soon.
Uh-huh.
Because if I'm a member of that team, if I'm one of the people making these decisions, I don't like that. I don't care where you've been and what kind of a veteran you are. Juventus lets you walk. They let you walk on a free. Like, please leave us. We don't want to see you anymore.
Bye, Felicia.
You don't need him. So this is stupid.
Guess what? It doesn't matter.
I don't want to hear about it anymore.
Well, it's the end of the story.
Well, good.
How much of the Bundesliga did you watch this past weekend?
Bits and pieces. Flipped around, saw a decent bit. Why?
Did you catch the Augsburg-Cologne match Sunday?
I caught that there was a missed penalty in it, but I didn't know what happened until I saw the quote.
Yes. And so, having to do with said missed penalty, Augsburg striker Florian Niederlechner believes the lack of crowd noise at their home match against Cologne contributed to his costly penalty miss.
Oh, it did. Okay.
So
why is he saying that?
He says the striker believes the eerie ghost atmosphere played a big part in him missing the penalty. He says after the match, he says, I made the biggest mistake you can make as a penalty taker. Crappy ghost games.
He said crappy ghost games?
Uh-huh. He says, actually, my corner is on the right every time. I let the situation really influence me. I was often the hero. Today, I was the fool. He says, as he was stepping up to take the penalty, a Cologne player told his keeper that Niederlechner likes to strike home into the right corner. After hearing the exchange between the two Cologne players, Niederlechner opted for the other corner before the keeper dived full stretch to deny the
I
PK.
wish you could just shut your big yapper!
So, let me get this straight.
Sure.
The player who missed the penalty is complaining about the ghost games.
Yes.
Because he heard a player tell the goalkeeper, hey, he always goes to that side.
Uh-huh.
So, if he hadn't heard that, he would have went to that side and it would have been saved. You would think, unless he hit a perfect penalty.
Right.
But he did hear it, And he tried to do something else, and he missed.
Yes, he got saved, yeah.
So he's complaining about hearing something that he wouldn't have heard otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And he's complaining about missing a penalty.
Uh-huh.
And blaming it on
crappy
ghost games. That's what he said?
That's
I know it's translated, but that's what it translated to.
I'm guessing that crappy was not the word, but sure.
It could have been. I don't know.
I'm thinking it might have been a little more colorful, but that's just me.
Well, that's you making assumptions about Florian Niederlechner, and he might not have that kind of potty mouth. You're putting words in his mouth, which is very unfair. I think he shouldn't have said anything at all because he missed a penalty. He should probably just keep his mouth shut.
That's a you problem, dude. No.
He heard more information than he would have, and just because he didn't do anything with it, that's on him.
Mm-hmm. But, yeah, so Florian Niederlechner was not pleased with the fact that there aren't any people in the stands, and he missed his penalty. Yes,
he heard it. He heard it. He heard that it was information. He just didn't use it effectively. That's on him.
Mm-hmm.
All right, a couple more things in Germany. German Minister Horst Seehofer, he is the interior minister. His support was really critical in getting the Bundesliga back on the field. He believes that they could find a way to get fans in the stands early next season. He said, I already have the confidence in my heart that we will be able to gradually open up audiences again in the new season. Not immediately, not like before coronavirus outbreak, but with fewer spectators, and so that the distances between the stadium visitors are kept. In Germany, and we talked about New Zealand a little minute ago, Germany, 300 new cases in the last 24 hours. At their peak, it was 7,000 in a 24-hour period in late March. They were the first major European country to ease restrictions on social distancing. Would they be the first to have fans in the stands? First major one? More than likely. I think that's a safe assumption here. And the DFL's already working with fan groups on how stadiums could look when fans return, how the tickets are distributed, what concessions would be available, et cetera, et cetera. The other big one in Germany from the business side is the bidding competition for broadcast rights domestically in Germany for the first and second division starts today. The decision's supposed to be made by June 22nd. It's almost like an auction kind of idea. There's 7 different packages, and this was supposed to be in March. It was pushed back because of the coronavirus outbreak. At that time, they were expecting an increase in rights fees. Now, they don't really know. I mean, that's the hard thing is you don't really know. They're not really expecting an increase, but is it going to be a decrease? Is it going to be a huge decrease? This is going to be a litmus test for a lot of rights fees that are going to come up in upcoming months and years. The DFL, they're hoping that there's some competition between Sky Germany. Sky Germany is now owned by Comcast, and are they going to be in a position to invest that kind of money? DAZN, which had huge effects due to Corona. They're potentially trying to find new investors, at least here. And I don't know if it's all in the same bucket or if the European side is maybe different. I don't know, but they've had huge losses. Amazon, which has not had huge losses. If anybody's doing well right now, it's Amazon. That's the big hope, according to Kicker. They took over a few games from Eurosport after Corona, and a lot of people think that opens up a possibility here. Telecom Magenta is a new player in the game. They've got the third division Euro 24 rights. Could they come up with a lot of money? It seems like Amazon's the one that, if there is any kind of an increase or a holding firm, it would be because Amazon comes in big. The others have question marks, and they did change from what I read. Originally, or in previous deals, you couldn't have one person buy up everything. You had to have different packages, or you had to have differences between broadcast and cable. I think that's all been removed now. If Johannes is still listening, correct me if I'm wrong. So could Amazon come in and buy the whole thing? Maybe. Would they want to do that? That's the question, is would they want to go down that road? Because Amazon globally has got to be looking at a lot of different properties that are going to be popping up. And do they want to commit in a huge way off the jump to the Bundesliga. I think they go in. I think they get something. But I don't know if they get everything. And we'll have to see. A lot of it's going to depend on what the prices look like.
Yeah, and I think that where Amazon is concerned when it comes to media rights, I think that over the next handful of years, I think that you'll see them dip their toe in a lot of different pools. We saw Amazon do that with the National Football League, where they have their own little mini package deal. They have a separate deal with the National Football League. You see them going with other properties. And so I don't think they'll necessarily go all in on something unless they really think it's going to benefit them. I think you'll see Amazon in a bunch of different places to make the greater property that much more attractive to a lot of different people.
I disagree in that they're still in the toe-dipping mode. I think they're past that. I think they're in the strategic growth mode. But I'm with you in that I don't think they commit to one league. I think they try to get packages in a number of places, and they try to get some international packages as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the Bundesliga, if you were going to go all in on one, I don't think that's the one they would go in on. I don't know what the next round of rights packages are in England, but that would probably be the one that if they really wanted to go one league solely, they would. But I could see a scenario over the next 3-4 years where Amazon has a package in Germany, a package in England, a package in the United States with MLS, packages with, they already have the NFL, but with others, and they keep adding to it. That's where I think they're going to go. But yeah, they're past testing things at this point. They've already seen success, and now they're in a position to really take advantage of their business. Their core business is good. It's not struggling like DAZN or anybody else.
No, and for me, with the cable system I have access to DAZN, but I have zero interest in boxing, and that's the only thing that right now is being offered domestically is their boxing package at $100 a year. Zero interest in that.
Yeah, I mean, well, right now that's what they have. I mean, when before this they had some leagues, they had some other things, but not enough for $100 a year for me.
No,
I just they never had enough to justify me jumping in on that. One other big thing that's happening today, in addition to Bundesliga rights going up for bid in Germany, Manchester City is trying to overturn their UEFA ban today. The Times in London has the article, £200 million at stake in this situation. I don't know how they're going to pull this off because, I mean, the evidence is pretty airtight that they were doing some shady things with it. The summary of where things stand. So last year in Champions League TV money, they earned £83 million last season. Another $10 million in Champions League matchday revenue. That tells you a lot about matchday revenue versus TV money. That's Champions League specifically. So they could lose, if they're not in the Champions League, roughly £83 million a year. They could lose another £10 million a year in matchday revenue. They're also facing a £27 million fine. The overall loss of not having that TV money, not having that matchday revenue, the fine, it's about 1/5 of their annual revenue. It's a good bit. Kevin De Bruyne has said that he might not stick around if the ban is upheld, and he wouldn't be the only one. CAS, once they reach their verdict on this, it's expected in July. The Premier League then plans to complete its own investigation into the allegations. If CAS says that this should be overturned, I don't know if UEFA is going to be able to make it stick. They probably wouldn't. They'd probably bow down to it. And then I don't think the Premier League would have anything go on with it. So that's another element to it, is if the appeal doesn't work, they could be facing more penalties from the Premier League on top of what UEFA's already thrown at them. People are out the door. People are leaving if that's the case. And we'll see. But this process starts now, and it's not going to take till July to get done. Man, Manchester City's future is very murky at the moment.
Yeah, man, they are not afraid to throw money at the problem. The Independent, by the way, has got a really good run. Meaning they're in their legal defense is what I'm saying. They're
Okay.
throwing
The way you said that you could have been implying that they would be bribing people, and I wanted to make sure that you were not implying that.
They are investing in their defense rather vigorously. How about that?
That's
the
yay.
The Independent's got a really nice write-up on the backgrounder and all of this, and the most high-profile member of their legal team is a lawyer whose reputation was enhanced by 2 successful challenges to the British government's handling of the Brexit process. So they're bringing in some high-profile lawyers in all of this, and if the suspension's upheld, that Champions League spot gets vacated, and that goes to the 5th place team. And so there's that race for 5th that's also a part of this subplot. Right now, that's Manchester United.
Yep, and that will be part of it all the way through. Because right now, you've got to try to get it thinking that it could be upheld. Because right now, Manchester City's not playing in the Champions League next year. If that gets taken away, there's really nothing those teams can do to complain about. But you got to position yourself for it. I'm not surprised that they have really good lawyers. They have a lot of money, so that's usually how this works. We'll see if the really good lawyers can get the job done. Really good lawyers are one thing, but evidence, which is a lot of it in this case, is kind of what usually these things turn on. Usually,
yes.
Especially in this kind of situation, because you're not looking at like a big public spectacle with public opinion driving the decisions of CAS here. It's going to be mostly all behind closed doors, I would imagine. Another club that I think shows you the effects of qualifying for the Champions League and not qualifying for the Champions League. Roma in Italy announced a net loss of 126.4 million euro for the first 9 months of the 2019-20 financial year. Start to do the math, you think back, the last 3 months, okay, that's why they left that out. I don't know what those losses are going to be yet. They're going to be a whole lot. In the first 9 months of the previous year, they lost 29.5 million euro. So about 100 million more. You miss out in Champions League? That's where that money is, as we heard on the Manchester City side. The TV money, the match day revenue associated with it, it's about 100 million euro, pounds, dollars, with all the different variations in terms of exchange rates. It's a lot. So when you're one of these clubs who, like a Roma, who is back and forth in qualifying, you see how catastrophic it can be. A lot of talk about Roma is that now, because they didn't take advantage of their situation where they brought in a good bit of money on transfers, they qualified for Champions League, they had a deep run in Champions League, they brought in a lot of money because of that. They didn't do anything with it. They didn't solidify their standing. They didn't make themselves one of the top teams no matter what in Italy. They blew it, basically. They blew a bunch of money. And now they're not in a better place than they were to begin with. And when that really comes to be a problem is when you have a global pandemic and things fall apart, as we're seeing. So, Roma not in a good situation. Real Madrid, this is an interesting one from Jose Felix Diaz at Marca. So, Real Madrid could lose 200 million euro in revenues based off where they are. But they might not actually lose money this year because of what they've done to handle everything. They've been able to balance the budget, which was 822 million euro. They put plans in place to avoid red ink in upcoming budgets and future accounts. They're going to stick to their budget. They haven't signed anybody. They're not going to sign anybody. Players did take a 10% pay cut. Players and directors did. That saved around 40 million euro. According to Marca, there won't be profits, but there won't be losses, and that's a big deal. Marca has reported that there are talks for fans to be allowed in Spanish stadiums at 30% capacity starting with the first week of next season. Real Madrid doesn't think that's going to be the case. They're planning that they won't have fans in the stands until at least October. The directors are hoping that by January of 21, they'll be back to normal in terms of a full building, and they'll be back to making that kind of money. So Real Madrid is a club that has maybe more money than most, but they've also maybe handled the situation because of things they've done financially better than most, and they're planning to handle it better than most. Now, planning right now to do that and then going out and dropping some stupid amount on a transfer because a player's available is a different conversation, and maybe that happens. But they have the squad that they could go into next season with and be just fine. They don't need to do it. They could actually find a way to get rid of Gareth Bale's crazy salary and do something with that. But they're in a good spot, and they're one of the ones that will be able to bounce back quicker. And they're one of the ones that will be able to take advantage of opportunities that do present themselves, because they're not staring at losses right now. They're staring at break even. Could they go find the money if they wanted, if Kevin De Bruyne, for example, becomes available because Manchester City gets banned? Could they go find that money to go sign him? Yeah, I'm sure they could. I'm sure they could find some corresponding sales to get rid of some players to fund it as well. They're in a position where they can take advantage of this. Others can't. You hear about Roma, you hear about Manchester City if they get banned. Real Madrid, smart business. They didn't get there by accident. They are that club for a reason. They've handled this very well.
And when you look at Real Madrid, let me ask you this: when it comes to what you've seen in the European theater, how many teams in your mind are actually handling their business well, along those same lines of a Real Madrid? Where
we're not hearing everybody, so I don't want to say that people aren't. I mean, we've heard about Real Madrid and their financial situation. We don't have the books at Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, whatever. I mean, it sounds like Tottenham is being pretty responsible because they're not talking about spending in the transfer market. Arsenal's not talking about spending unless they sell players. Chelsea has spent. Liverpool, I would assume, is going to be in a position to be just fine. I think it's the clubs you would expect. I don't think anybody that is like Juventus, for example. I don't think Juventus is going to fall apart because of this. I think they're going to be okay. Roma is already losing a lot before this. Are they going to lose more because of this? Yeah, but they were already down this road. If you already lost 100 million euro more than you did in the previous 9-month segment, comparable year to year, well, this problem was before coronavirus for them. Like, that's going to accentuate it, but it's not coronavirus that's going to wreck Roma. It's the fact they didn't qualify for the Champions League, and they didn't do anything to solidify their position with the money that they did earn from their Champions League run and from transfers, etc. So just because we're not hearing that some clubs are doing well doesn't mean they're not. Real Madrid, we're hearing they are. I think teams like Arsenal talking about not spending in the transfer market because they can't afford to, that's a smart business thing to do right now. We'll see who all goes along with it, and we'll see who all does it. But the strongest clubs are going to be the clubs that are in the best position to handle this because they have the strongest financials coming into it. A club like Roma is the prime example of the opposite. They were in a bad position coming into it, and it got worse.
And you mentioned Chelsea. I saw this come buzzing across my timeline. Roman Abramovich is apparently paying $120 million to buy Edvard Munch's Scream painting from a private collection.
And that tells you why Chelsea doesn't have to worry for money.
Yep.
I mean, that's why they can go out and get a Timo Werner. Because their owner's spending that kind of money on paintings right now. And, is that going to mean they can't buy another player? I don't know. Maybe so. And financial fair play, who knows what that's going to mean going forward with all this, too. If they can just spend and not have the revenue to back it up. I don't know. But Chelsea has a rich owner, so they're going to be okay. They can go out and spend. Arsenal doesn't really have that in the same way because, and this is not a knock, and people might take it as such, Kroenke hasn't shown that willingness to spend like that. Kroenke's not going out and buying screen paintings for hundreds of millions. So he's not recklessly spending hundreds of millions with his roster either. And is that good or bad? I don't know. Arsenal fans, you tell me. I don't know what you want, but is Arsenal handling this in a fiscally responsible way? If their stance is to not go out and spend right now because of the losses in revenue, then, well, that's pretty fiscally responsible right now.
Yeah, saw that note come across on Abramovich with, and that seemed to be something right in his wheelhouse from his history of his spending habits.
Good for him. I mean,
Just
he's got the money.
yeah.
Now, you want to get into how he got his money? That's a different conversation.
Uh-huh.
But he's got money. If he wants to go buy something fancy, good for him.
Yep.
It's the same idea that, Deloy Hansen, we have to criticize Deloy Hansen because he bought some crazy expensive coins. Good for Deloy Hansen because he's got the money to spend on crazy expensive collectible coins. Yay.
That's your thing.
That's what it is. That's what it is. Real Salt Lake is a club that when you look at the Forbes numbers year after year, the revenues are not big. Not big at all. They're some of the lowest, but they're also not losing a bunch of money. He's running that club in a fiscally responsible way. Could he spend more if he wanted to? Well, if he can spend it on crazy coins, yeah, I guess he could. But would that be fiscally responsible? Because we criticize clubs that do that in other countries. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's easy to point fingers. Good for Roman Abramovich living his best life, buying crazy expensive paintings. Yay.
Do you want me to thank somebody who's vital to the SDH networks and Soccer Down here on a daily basis?
He is vital. He is very, very important to Soccer Down here. He's very, very important for a lot of reasons. Tell us about Steve Apolinsky.
Apolinsky and Associates, LLC, aa-legal.com. You can catch up with him a bunch of different ways. Wrongful death and serious injury cases, if you've got one, in Georgia and Alabama. Catch up with Steve. aa-legal.com. Website pops up. The instant it pops up, chat window, low right-hand corner. You can have a live chat with somebody 24/7, 365. Jason continues to advise me I should not ask in a live chat what they're wearing at 3 o'clock in the morning. Also, 404-377-9191. If you want to give them a ring, you get a free consultation that way. And what you can also do is shoot Steve an email himself, steve at aa-legal.com. Over 30 years of experience, over $40 million in judgments for clients in Georgia and Alabama, recognized as legal elite by Georgia Trend Magazine. Top 100 lawyers in this here state of Georgia. Once again, Apolinsky and Associates, aa-legal.com, 404-377-9191, or Steve, steve at aa-legal.com.
So we have an update on the Manchester City situation.
Okay.
Der Spiegel, who has covered a lot of this kind of stuff for a while, Christoph Winterbach, he says that Manchester City's CEO, Soriano, has said Manchester City will bring irrefutable evidence that the claims are not true. Winterbach also said that a person with knowledge of the UEFA investigation says, provided UEFA don't cave in, they should win at CAS. City has no evidence at all. So, that's kind of diametrically opposite. Not a surprise.
No.
Article over at ft.com, Financial Times, about this by Murad Ahmed and Kate Bioli. So, for people who are new to this and don't know the details, basically, UEFA delivered this sanction, which is unprecedented. It's never happened before, this kind of ban. Also a 30 million euro fine, 27 million pounds, in February. Serious breaches of the financial fair play rules. A lot of it came down to basically Manchester City trying to hide the sources of money coming into their coffers, because that's what financial fair play is. Financial fair play, essentially, you are limited to spending what you make. That's the idea behind it anyway. And as people who have criticized financial fair play have said, what this does is it kind of keeps the big clubs as who they are if they keep running themselves intelligently. You can't come in and buy a club and just spend willy-nilly, because you are limited to what you make as a club. So how do you get around that? Things we've seen. Selling the stadium to the owner or somebody affiliated with the owner, as we've seen some clubs do. Sponsorships that are family businesses of the owner, things like that. Are there ways to get around it? Yeah, there's ways to get around any kind of policy. I think we know this. But Manchester City, from some of the things we've heard, really didn't try that hard. It really wasn't a good effort to get around this stuff. So Manchester City, the club is owned by Sheikh Mansour, billionaire member of the Abu Dhabi ruling family. As we said, you're talking about a revenue hit of around £100 million a season. Kevin De Bruyne says he's walking. I don't know if Pep Guardiola would or not. He said he wouldn't. We'll see. This is a big deal for UEFA. Maybe bigger than it is for Manchester City. Because in the past, we've seen the financial fair play system. We've seen fines. We've seen, I think, potential bans. Pretty much all of them have been overturned at some point. There's been some fines that have been upheld, but any kind of, like, real penalties. Chelsea, for example. Chelsea's transfer ban was supposed to be, how long? 3 windows?
3.
Did it end up being any, really?
1.
One?
1, yeah.
Okay. That's, UEFA doesn't want their rules to have no teeth. So this is a big one. This also is a big one for, owners like the prospective new owners of Newcastle coming from Saudi Arabia, owners from the UAE, owners from Qatar who want to invest money in clubs. They want to come in. Are there maybe some other benefits they're looking for in their investment? Yes, I think we all know that. But for the clubs, the financial fair play system limits what an owner can come in and just pump into the club. So that's the back and forth here. There's high stakes, both sides. Both sides are not skimping on what they're spending on the legal side. Ferran Soriano, the CEO at Manchester City, talked about the irrefutable evidence that the claims are not true. UEFA is saying there's no evidence. Again, this is pretty typical before a court case. The final CAS judgment, which is where they are, and John loves CAS. He says they mean nothing. Obviously, they do mean something because this is going there, and this is a big deal. So there's something to it. You can stop dissing CAS, John.
Nah.
There you go again. So when CAS rules on it, UEFA is going to act on the ruling. I think the Premier League is going to act on the ruling. UEFA is not going to ignore it if CAS comes back and says, yeah, you can't do that. This didn't happen, or you can't do that to Manchester City. UEFA is not going to push forward, I don't think. I think they will fold at that point if CAS rules in Manchester City's favor. If CAS rules in UEFA's favor, there's really nowhere else for Manchester City to go. I mean, they could go
Swiss courts, I think.
Yeah, but you're just going to be wasting money at that point because UEFA is just going to say, yes, over here, this ruling here, here it is for you. It's a lengthy document that backs up what we said. And are they a ruling court? No, but do they have some clout? Yes, and here you go. This is going to effectively decide it. Could there be appeals and repercussions and all of it? Of course, because that's how any legal system works. But this is going to happen in July, is what we're expecting. It starts today. The ruling's not going to happen until July. This will have a huge implication on next season. This will have a huge implication on Manchester City, obviously, on the Champions League as a whole, on the Premier League as a whole, on owners like the people trying to come in and buy Newcastle, on other prospective owners, on the financial fair play system as a whole, which has already been talked about potentially needing some revamp. There's a lot of different things. This is not just a basic, this club got punished, they're appealing, and we'll see what happens. This has got more implications to it. This is a big deal.
Michael Ruiz is in this morning, and I've got a bit of a Newcastle update in a bit whenever you want to go to it. Michael asks, do you think MLS benefits from the financial instability of many clubs in Europe shown over the past 3 months? I expect many players could be lured to the financial stability of MLS as a whole. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it expands the clubs that, or expands the player base that MLS could pull from. You know, MLS is not going to pull in Kevin De Bruyne. if this happens with Manchester City. They're not going to pull in, they're not going to pull in a top international in their prime at 25, 26, 27. It's not going to happen. There's still going to be plenty of suitors for them. I think what it does, though, and this is where I've been kind of looking at things in Europe and where I'm wondering about, it's that next tier. It's that what I think we would consider TAM players a lot of times, but could be designated players as well. And this is just the European side. Players who have been loaned out by clubs, players who are bought by a big club, loaned out, players who are with a lesser first division team or a top second division team chasing a deal, guys who might get squeezed out right now because there's always going to be money found for a Kevin De Bruyne. There's not always going to be money found for that really good right back. There's not always going to be money found for that third center back at a Champions League team. Could that player decide, well, now my paradigm has shifted in Europe to where I can either go to a lesser team or drop down a division because the money's not here, or I could go to MLS and make comparable money and live in the United States. And I think that's going to be an appealing thing for some people. It will. I think MLS can take advantage of it. I think MLS can take advantage of the instability that this coronavirus outbreak is going to have in South America as well, because I think that's where maybe it's more of an immediate one where, and Europe overlaps with it because the next Ezequiel Barco kind of player, the player who, let's take Vinicius Jr. at Real Madrid as a prime example, because both of those guys were in the Copa Sudamericana final. A lot of people were like, well, Vinicius is going to Real Madrid and he's getting like $55, $60 million transfer. Why is Barco going to MLS for $15 million? Why wouldn't Independiente hold on to him and sell him straight to Europe? Well, Independiente needed the money. First off, they needed the money then. In Brazil, they could hold out and Brazilian players have a premium and they could get more money for a player in Vinicius Jr. who was not playing as much as Barco was with Independiente. And look, I mean, he's paying off on that big transfer that Real Madrid paid for him. I mean, he's a top talent. But players like that, maybe European clubs are not going to be willing to take a flyer, it's a pretty well-informed flyer in his case, but a flyer on a player like that because they don't have as much money to spend. You're not going to be able to take a chance on a guy for the future as much as you used to. Could those players become available to MLS, where MLS gets more of those guys on the way up than they were before? I think so. Do they get more of that second tier? Barco was a player who maybe needed a little more time to be that player. He can go, and he can go to Europe. Now, then the question is then the second part, where MLS players going to Europe, a Barco, the next guy's coming through now, what is the market going to be for them coming out of MLS? That's the part we don't know. That's the part that I wonder about. Does that mean that players spend a longer period of time here? It could. Does that mean that players, some, come and spend their whole career here? It could. Does it mean that only a smaller number are going to get that opportunity to go to Europe? It also could, at least in the short term. Then the question goes back to, does MLS invest in those players if the sale option is not as strong as it was before? That's a valid question, too. There's so much that we don't know yet. There's so much that we don't know how this shakes out. I think MLS will be in a position to have a better level of player in the league, period. I think that part I feel comfortable in saying because they'll be able to get some players they couldn't get before. Their money might go a little bit further than it did before. And the level of play, the level of player in the league will go up. But will teams want to have that happen if in some of those cases, the second part of the equation, where you bring in a player for a good price and then sell them for a big profit, if that big profit doesn't materialize, if that part doesn't happen as much, are you going to be as likely to raise the level of play by going to get good young players? That's the part we don't know yet. That's the part that is a little more risky now than maybe it was before. I don't think we're going to know for a few years, to be honest. I think MLS is going to have to figure this out. They're going to have to be smart. They're going to have the opportunity to invest. I mean, they're investing right now in getting back on the field, where some leagues that are at this kind of level of revenue and revenue loss aren't. They're going to get back out there, and they're investing in that because they think they can bounce back quicker. How do you bounce back quicker? That's going to be the question, and that's what is we're going to have to wait and see. I think when you compare what MLS is doing to what Major League Baseball is doing, and now reports are that baseball players and owners will be talking today about trying to salvage the season, the MLB side of it, they have a CBA that expires after next season. MLS had a CBA they had agreed to coming into the season, so a little different, but once everything became in flux, that CBA could have been a bigger deal. MLS got the CBA secured, so they're good going forward. MLS also wanted to get all that done and get back on the field because they have a TV rights deal coming up after 22. They can start negotiating, reportedly, according to older reports, a year before that deal expires. That deal is potentially a transformative deal for the league, even in this climate. I think this climate has changed the conversation, but ESPN's not going anywhere. They're not going out of business. Fox, FS1, FS2, Fox Deportes, they're not going out of business. Might they want to spend a little bit less? Maybe. ESPN has ESPN Plus, which is becoming a powerhouse for them in a lot of ways. That's going to be a big driver of this. There's also going to be Amazon lurking. And for MLS, what they want is to dance the dance that they're doing right now. They're getting back on the field. ESPN's going to be producing these broadcasts from Orlando. Still involving the other partners, but ESPN is going to feel really good about all the access they're going to get to this. They need the content. They're going to get the content. That's going to help build that relationship even further. You would think that is a precursor to a future deal. But just like we said in Germany, where Germany wants Amazon to come in and bid, they want numbers to go up. MLS needs an outside person to come in and bid some numbers up, whether it's NBC, whether it's Fox coming in to get a bigger chunk because they've lost the Bundesliga and they have nothing really to go along with MLS in the World Cup now. Whether it's an Amazon, whether it's somebody else. They
CBS.
Need somebody else to come in. CBS potentially, yeah. They need somebody else to come in and bid to push the numbers up. But you can't get any of that to happen if you don't get back on the field and you don't make that investment now. You can't make those numbers go up if you don't bring in top talent. And just like we said, there's this balance of bringing in a Zlatan, a Rooney, a name, a Chicharito, smart move, they needed to do it. A Vela moves the needle. You need those players in this league because those are players that are going to bring you TV ratings. You also need the players like a Joseph Martinez, like a Pity Martinez, like an Ezequiel Barco, like a Diego Valeri. You need those top talents to come in and raise the level of play. Because if the play is good, people are going to watch more. Sometimes you need a big name to hook people first, but then you need people to stick around. If it's good soccer, people are going to stick around. You've got to find that balance. So even with that worry about, well, maybe the future sales aren't going to be what it used to be. Maybe, we're going to have to invest a little bit now more than we thought about because there's some players that are available. You got to weigh it between we're raising the level of play, but are we spending for a good player thinking it's a Zlatan or a Chicharito, but it's just a good player that's going to raise the level? We can't spend stupid money for that. That's the balance you got to walk, because at times it's felt like there's been some signings that, look, are not going to move the needle in the same way. They're just good players. It's just a nice player to have in a team that's going to make the level better, but they're not going to sell the jerseys. They're not going to sell the shirts. They're not going to draw in the TV ratings straight away. You need both if you're MLS, and that's a tough balance to walk. There's some changes to the equation now that they have to get right, and if they do, they can jump some of those spots in that overall world ranking and that overall breaking through the conversation, because baseball is going to take a hit even if they come back this year. Period. MLS has an opportunity to get in front of people and build their brand up bigger and better than ever before this year. Even in light of all this, they've got to take advantage of that. We could be looking at a different situation in American sports in terms of that conversation. That's going to affect the media rights. We could be looking at MLS being seen as a bigger league worldwide coming out of this. That's going to affect those media rights domestically. It's going to affect those media rights internationally, too, that come up all the time. This is a big 18 months for MLS. Huge. And if they take advantage of everything that could be falling into their lap, MLS could be, by the time we get to World Cup 2022, one of the top 6 leagues in the world. They really could be in that conversation if they take full advantage of all the opportunities that have presented themselves. But there's still a lot of questions, too. There's not just this clear blueprint on how to do it. They've got to be nimble, and they've got to manage it as it comes. And they've got to make the right decisions as they come. It's not going to be easy.
Let me throw a player's name out at you, and it's a shiny object. So I want to know what you think. With the Mario Balotelli situation that's going on at Brescia, we've heard a couple of teams, Galaxy, Toronto. What about Balotelli in this current environment?
Depends on the price tag. He's not Lionel Messi. He's not David Beckham. He's not Cuauhtemoc Blanco. He's not that guy. He is a player that could come in and be good for some teams. He's a player that could blow up in your face as well. It's a lot of questions. But he is not a player who's going to come in and boost the ratings by himself. He's not a player who's going to come in and sell an obscene amount of jerseys by himself. You have to know what you're going to get. And that's the biggest question when it comes to Balotelli. You don't know what you're going to get. Would I think coming to MLS, would it be a good move for Balotelli? Yeah, I think it would. He would not be dealing with some of the same challenges that he's dealt with in Italy. He would be more comfortable. That'd be a very good thing for him. Maybe you would get the best out of him. You got to have the right manager to handle him, too. We'll see. It depends on the situation. Toronto, why would Toronto need him? That doesn't even make any sense.
No, that was just one of the
Galaxy.
names I saw.
But
yeah.
But this is the point, and we're getting spam on Twitch, which is just awesome. I guess we're moving up in the world. This is the point, and this is why we have to be clear about these things. Why would Toronto need Mario Balotelli? Yay, there's a report. Yippee skippy. There's people telling us that we can go to adviewers.com on Twitch and become famous. I don't believe that. So I don't believe the report about Toronto needing Mario Balotelli. Why would they? They've got Josie Altidore.
I was going to say, where would he fit?
He doesn't. That's what I'm saying. Yippee, there's a report. LA Galaxy. They just signed Chicharito. Where's he going to fit? There's nowhere for him to play. It's not going to work. Doesn't make any sense. There's not a lot of teams that make a lot of sense. Unless he just wants to come to, we might have to sort this out. Thanks, Twitch guys. We're working on it. I'll have to figure out how to jump in and do that live. But yeah, we've made it. I don't believe those people saying that. I don't believe adviewers.com is actually going to help us. So I don't believe that Mario Balotelli going to Toronto or LA Galaxy would make any sense. Chris Ashley says Charlotte or Austin. That's a different conversation because, yes, this summer they absolutely could go in for something like that and build a team around him. If I'm Josh Wolf, I want no part of it because you already have enough challenges in your first head coaching job with an expansion team. I don't want to add Mario Balotelli to that. Yeah. I think you need a veteran coach to deal with him. Bruce Arena could deal with him, but the Revolution don't really need him. Would they want to consider it? They've already made other moves. I just don't think it makes any sense for them. But that's the kind of manager who could handle him. Outside of that, I mean, Kansas City would be another one. Peter Vermes could handle him, but you don't need him because you signed Alan Pulido. There's not a lot of good spots that are just obvious for him. I really don't think it's that simple. Miami, maybe. And now Miami could be the one that would be an interesting spot, and that would make a lot of sense on a lot of different checklists. Could you do a 6-month deal with an option for another year if it works out? Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Maybe that's the one. But and you've got a manager who can handle him there, a manager who's been around the block, and a manager who wouldn't put up with a bunch of nonsense. And that's the question with Balotelli. It's just what Balotelli are you going to get? Are you going to get a motivated Balotelli? Or are you going to get a guy who's going to come in and work hard and be there for the team and do what's necessary? Or are you going to get a selfish player who's going to have problems off the field? You know, both have happened in his career, and you do have to weigh that when you're making a heavy investment. I think in the right situation, he could thrive. And maybe Miami's up.
And apparently, our friends at Ad Viewers, if you drop $100, you can get 30,000 followers in their King Followers plan.
Yeah, I don't believe that.
Nathan says that Jurgen Klopp would help Jadon Sancho mature. He guarantees it.
Well, they lost their opportunity before to get him. They're going to have to pony up if they want to get him. Jadon Sancho's fine. Daily Mirror's trying to create drama. And Emre Can can shut up anytime he wants.
Well, he'll have the opportunity to shut up, as you said, probably with another squad next year.
Potentially. I think that's a bad look to try to make something of a small thing anyway.
You want to run a teammate publicly over a haircut. Justin Felder, friend of the network over at Fox 5. Atlanta United starts training as a full team as of about 45 minutes ago. Per the team, in order to participate, players must complete 2 COVID-19 tests 24 hours apart, 72 hours before starting training. You have to take an antibody test, take COVID-19 tests every other day during training, among other extensive precautions released by the team. So seeing that, Shiva says that she's very impressed by how quick our club could complete this testing and how prepared we are to get training started today. Vamos.
Atlanta United's going to do everything possible to train as much as possible. They always have. They took advantage of the training sessions after the season in 2017 under Tata Martino to implement a 3-man backline, and that paid off in a big way as 2018 went on. So I'm not surprised by that. There were plans to have the testing start for Atlanta United last week before everything was done, but the lockout threat and players not participating in voluntary workouts kind of got in the way of that. So they were ready to roll, and because they were planning ahead. I mean, none of this stuff was a surprise. And you mentioned the protocols. We talked about those in detail last week. Those are very strong protocols that didn't come out of thin air. Teams knew they were coming, and teams that are prepared to manage that situation are going to be ahead of the rest. And Atlanta United and Sporting Kansas City were the two that were ready to handle the group training that was still socially distanced, pre-testing group training. Now, it doesn't surprise me that those are the two that are going to be ready to handle the step 2 full group training. You have to do the testing. Like, that's the difference. I mean, that's the difference in the plans, because the way the stuff goes, and MLS has been clear in this, you present a plan to MLS that has the sign-off of your local health agencies, and then MLS signs off on it. But you have to create your plan. You have to have it checked off along the way. The difference, really, between what they had already done, which was the socially distanced group training that they were ready to move into, and they did last week, because they had the sign-off to start that last Monday. Remember, there wasn't sessions until later in the week because of the CBA stuff. The only difference was the testing. Like, the difference between the two is the testing, because if you do the testing, then you're able to do traditional team training in a group setting. That's it. That's the difference. So once they got everything agreed to and they created this out, you do the testing, you're good to go. No big changes. And Turner, I have said testing 75 million times since mid-March. And I'll probably say it 75 million more the rest of the year, because it's a huge element of doing all this the right way. Mm-hmm. But it's what all of it spends on. And if that was the only difference between the socially distanced group training and full team training, was to do the testing that they required, you started it on Thursday, and you had Thursday, you had Friday, you had Saturday, you had Sunday to get an antibody test, to get 2 tests 24 hours apart done, get players, checked off and good. You can start training today. They were ready to jump on it. They did. I don't know if other teams have their plans, because you go back to the group training part, the socially distanced group training. Atlanta and Kansas City had their plans approved going into Monday morning. I don't know where other teams are in that side of it, getting their plans approved locally to handle the next step in terms of any kind of interaction, even if it was socially distanced. Now, you don't need that step. You can skip it, and you can just do your individual training, do all your testing, have your plan approved, go to team training. Atlanta and Kansas City are ahead of the curve. 2 clubs that are very well run and have very strong technical staffs to do it.
I have news out of Canada and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's most recent addiction, in addition to the quick Newcastle news. What's on your table around the world?
What's going on in Canada?
Bob Williams over at Sport Business. We know that the Canadian Premier League, the stories that have come out, they're looking at 2 possible venues if they're looking to get their season off and going. It would be Prince Edward Island and Vancouver. The article that Bob has, he caught up with the GM of Pacific FC, and the GM, obviously, of Pacific FC, Langford, British Columbia, Vancouver Island. That is where they're looking to stage the event if it gets out west. The GM has kind of quietly been saying, although not so quietly now since it's out in print, that he's kind of angling for the games in the CPL to be played out west at his home venue. So you have an island on the East Coast, an island on the West Coast. And, so the GM was real quiet about it until the article came out.
Okay.
So right now that's the debate of what's going on. CPL players have had 25% of their contracts deferred. Coaches, technical staff, club employees have taken wage reductions. CPL has also sought 15 million Canadian in short-term financing from the federal government. And
that's interesting.
Josh Simpson, Pacific FC president, says that the financial impact has been huge. It's difficult to get a sports league off the ground as it is, and to be interrupted by a world pandemic to be able to carry the clubs and the league. It's an expensive operation, so there are huge financial implications, obviously, that our ownership is enduring and working through with our players and staff. As far as the 2020 event, there are certain costs with that as well, and the prospect of the CPL going under has absolutely not been a topic of conversation. So that's where we are with the CPL.
Okay. I want to see how long this goes in Canada, because I don't know where the money stands. I don't know if it makes sense for them to throw a bunch of money to play a short-term season, and what's the return? What's it actually going to be worth for them? I don't know. Other news around the world, Juan Carlos Diaz at Marca is talking about La Liga, and I'll be curious to see what we get on the feeds here on BN Sport starting Thursday. Media Pro's 3D technology will allow empty stadiums to be filled with images and sounds of virtual fans. It's going to be like the FIFA 20 video game is what they're describing it as. In Spain, you'll have 2 parallel channels, like the Sky broadcasts in Germany, where you can pick. Do you want the authentic, empty stands, just, live natural sound, or do you want the virtual crowd and the recorded crowd noise? You can pick between the 2. We'll see what feed BN picks up for La Liga matches. We'll come back to England. We'll finish with them because there's a few different assorted things there. Another interesting one in Scotland, the BBC had this over the weekend. Ross County has bought a coronavirus testing machine. Rather than just spending all the money to get players tested all the time, there's still a cost to get tests done. But the machine cost them £35,000. Now, with the machine, they're able to cut their player staff testing twice a week in half. It's 3,000 per week as opposed to 6,000 per week, 6,000 pounds per week, or 5,000 pounds per week. It's about half. It depends on who you talk to and what the prices for these tests are doing. So if you run numbers on it, that machine will essentially pay for itself with the savings after about 4 months. And then you're doing even better. And what they've also said is that they will offer use of the machine to other sports people in their area. Each test takes about 20 minutes to complete, and that gives them the positive or the negative in 20 minutes. So they don't have to wait a day, 2 days, 3 days. They bought this testing apparatus from South Korea. They said, and this is from their chairman, Roy McGregor, it's imperative that all 12 clubs in the Premiership have testing in whatever way, whether it's third party, their own, or shared. If one of your club fails a test, the whole club will have to go into quarantine for 14 days, which rules out playing. That would mean that the Scottish protocols are like that, which is not very realistic in a long-term way of playing a season out. You got to have the testing. And this testing machine for Ross County will allow them to do lots of different tests, too. So they say that these types of machines will just become part of football clubs going forward. So keep an eye on that one. But actually offering it up to other sports entities in the area is a really good plan.
Yep.
We've talked about France. We've talked about where they are in the courts with all of this. The Council of State is expected to make a judgment today or tomorrow about restarting the season, what it could look like, how they could make it work, et cetera, et cetera. We've heard from Alexander Seferin that UEFA would like to see that happen without saying they'd like to see that happen. In Portugal, they have identified the subjects related to the bus attack at Benfica. The Portuguese police have confirmed that these folks are part of the radical wing of a Benfica Ultras group and that the members tend to act on their own accord. Well, ban them all and not have them attack buses.
Yes.
Argentina. Not shocked that we've already got a club who is breaking the rules on training.
I read this.
This is a smaller club, Deportivo Riestra, and this is not the first time they have been in the news. Dan Edwards at the Buenos Aires Times had this. This is a club that is a smaller club. They have kind of bounced around the lower divisions over their time. What's wild about it is they are owned by effectively, and Argentina is kind of like Germany in that they try not to have a singular owner. Well, this guy who effectively owns Deportivo Riestra is a lawyer, Victor Stenfale, who in the past has defended the likes of infamous late bank robber Luis Alberto Gordo Valor, leader of the Boca Juniors Dolce Barra, and Syrian arms dealer Monzer Al-Qasser, the Prince of Marbella. This is a guy who owns this team, famously said, "I would defend Hitler if someone gave me $1 million."
Wow.
So this club doesn't really have a lot of friends. They have thrown money around to do all kinds of different things. They held a training session on Wednesday, and they're not allowed to train. They face penalties for this. They could even be kicked out of the league structure as a whole. And when you have an owner who does the things and says the things like this guy has, there's not many people that's going to help them at this point. They were potentially going to be in playoff zone to go up to the first division. They're going to at least get a point deduction. That's not going to happen now. They're going to get knocked out of that. This is a club that so they went from the Primera D, which is the bottom tier of organized nationwide soccer in Argentina. Diego Maradona acted as a honorary coach and motivational speaker. He probably got a fat check, and who knows where that check went to when that happened. They got promoted to the second division in a playoff win over Comunicaciones. That match was mired in controversy when Riestra fans invaded the pitch with 5 minutes still on the clock and their team winning. the remaining matches, there were 5 minutes left on the clock and whatever stoppage time, those were replayed at a later date. So they came back later to play 5 minutes plus. People said this is stupid. There should have been, they should have had to forfeit the game. They held on in those 5 minutes to win the game. They got a 20-point deduction for it, and they got bumped out of the second division. They got bumped back into the second division in 2019, and they're right now in a playoff spot to get promoted. I don't think they end up staying in that playoff spot after getting caught breaking the rules. If they got a 20-point deduction for what they did before, they're going to get at least a 10-point deduction for this, and that's going to take them out of the playoff spot. In Australia, they still have not figured out anything without a contract players. They have not figured out anything about what's going on with Fox Sports and how to go forward. They are just floating along, not knowing anything. Welcome to Australia. Vietnam. Vietnam had fans in the stands, no curbs on crowd sizes. They have had just 328 confirmed cases of coronavirus since it broke out. No deaths. And they're back to normal. They had a lot of testing. They had a mass centralized quarantine program. A little bit easier to do when you are a communist-ruled country and you can have that kind of authority, but they did, and they have fans in the stands now. So that's where they're at. Again, not a comparable situation to any other country in the world, but that's where they're at. Mexico, Club León confirmed 2 positive tests, and León's in the news for another element too. Leones Negros, we know them well. They played Atlanta United in preseason. They released an open letter stating their desire to join Liga MX. Remember, there's no promotion for a few years now, and they ask how to do it. They're trying to put pressure on to expand Liga MX, the first division. Ezequiel Gasca is a journalist in Mexico. From him, he says that Liga MX president Enrique Bonilla told Leones Negros to buy one of León, Atlas, or Santos and just move them to Guadalajara. And they don't really like that idea. And Club León fans didn't really like that idea, and there were protests outside of their building. And yeah. When you mentioned Canada, I thought you might be talking about Kyle Larin, and this is the kind of situation that MLS needs to keep an eye on and why things are going to be weird in the transfer market. So Kyle Larin, under contract to Besiktas, not part of their long-term plans. He's been on loan at Zulte in Belgium. 9 goals, 11 assists. Pretty freaking good. They've got an option to buy. Before all this, they were going to take advantage of that option to buy. Well, they are in big financial trouble. They can't take that advantage of that option to buy. Leeds have shown an interest in it, but Leeds was going to buy him from Zulte. They were going to have Zulte trigger the option, and then Leeds was going to buy him. That's fallen apart somehow in the negotiations. Now CSKA Moscow has chimed in. They've reportedly offered Larin a $2 million a year contract, but will they get to a deal with Besiktas? And then will Zulte find money to make the deal happen for them and then potentially sell him? Like, could they trigger the buy option and then sell him anyway? It's all complicated. But Larin is that kind of in-between level player that I think is going to have a lot of problems in the transfer market.
Yeah.
Where is the money going to be for that kind of player? Kevin De Bruyne, you're going to find money. Kyle Larin, you're not. Or it's going to be a lesser club that's going to have any opportunity for it. You know, he was looking at playing in Belgium and then potentially going to the championship, and now it's like he could go to Russia. Is that where he wants to be? Is that what he wants to do?
Yeah.
Those are the players that I worry about, those in-betweens. We'll see. We'll see how this market sorts out. Let's go through England real quick with a variety of things. We mentioned the testing results. Everything is looking good on that front. You had some scrimmages behind closed doors over the weekend. Manchester United, Newcastle, Chelsea all played intra-squad scrimmages at their home venue, and a lot of the idea is to get players used to playing in an empty venue. Arsenal played Charlton, won 6-0 at the Emirates behind closed doors. Aston Villa drew 2-2 with West Brom in a scrimmage behind closed doors. It's just part of the ramp-up process. We haven't seen other leagues do that. England has. With all the testing results being where they are, they should be fine. There shouldn't be any issues. I would assume that the referees or whoever was refereeing these games, in terms of two teams playing one another, would have been tested and would have started their protocols as well. Matt Slater at The Athletic has a piece that if you're interested in the Newcastle situation, you should go read it. And it starts with a very interesting point. June 21st, first weekend of Premier League action back. Newcastle United is going to play Sheffield United. Newcastle United has the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia trying to buy them. Sheffield United is owned by a minor Saudi prince. In Saudi Arabia, the match will only be available on a pirate streaming service that steals the rights from beIN Sports. That's what leads to all this. In the week before, and this is what makes all this even more awkward, we mentioned that World Trade Organization report that has been shared with the Premier League that has already been said to find that the Saudi state has basically allowed this piracy to go on and diminish beIN Sports and Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, not exactly copacetic these days. Yeah. That World Trade Organization report could come out before the league starts back on June 17th, just to add to the fun. It will more than likely be out before that match happens with Newcastle and Sheffield United. How is this deal going to go down? But people are pretty much saying that it's going to happen now. Like, most people think it's going to happen. I don't know. And in one of Slater's sources puts it this way at the end. They say, the situation could be, quote, a potential disaster that could become the biggest win-win in history. If, as part of all this, the Premier League persuades the Saudis to properly crack down on BOutQ, the pirate network, lift its blockade of beIN, who beIN has invested £1.3 billion in English football since 2015, which is a lot. Mm-hmm. And if the Premier League can convince the Saudis to allow its lawyers to take the right to protect the rights holders in Saudi Arabia. So what this source is saying is that the way it gets done is if the league convinces Saudi Arabia to protect its rights with other entities. Is that really a win-win?
No, I didn't think so.
It's not much of a win-win. It's trying to find some positive.
Yeah, you're trying to find a silver lining in this relationship.
It's not a win-win. This is ignoring all of the other issues with Saudi Arabia, with this fund. Well, I think the important point was at the beginning, though. You have other Saudi Arabian money in the Premier League already. Mm-hmm. And you have other money that you want to start throwing questions about the ethics and morality of said money that's already in the league. You're going to be looking at a few different things. That part is far murkier for the league to deal with. This is far easier for the league to deal with. I don't know how you get the deal done. Anyway, if they try to find a silver lining, good for them, I guess. Arsenal is cutting scouting around Europe. They are letting folks go. Several senior continental scouts are being cut. This move comes days after it was revealed the financial pressure at the Emirates had resulted in 10 part-time academy scouts losing their jobs. In some of these instances, those with 20 years plus of service to the club were offered just 1 month's money as a severance clause. Arsenal did not furlough staff at all during this. Players and Mikel Arteta, their manager, did accept pay cuts, but this is the reality of the financial situation that Arsenal's in. Adam Leventhal at The Athletic, so another Athletic article to go check out, talking about what games could look like in England. Cardboard cutouts. Nottingham Forest could do that. The Premier League could do it. You're trying to create some partnerships to do it. All kinds of different elements. Could it help some cash flow? Potentially. He gets into some of the details of what that could look like. And Sky Sports, talking about the Liverpool women situation that we've mentioned a few times. Courtney Sweetman-Kirk is former forward for Liverpool. She left the club after her contract ended. She pointed out a couple of things. She said, maybe just the importance that is placed on the women's side, which I think is just as important. Money is obviously one thing and makes the world go round, but in terms of how you make people feel and what your place is within the club as a whole, it hasn't been fantastic. Liverpool's women have played at Tranmere at Prenton Park. They have trained away from the facility. The new facility in Kirkby that Liverpool is building, the women will not be included there either, which is completely ridiculous. It's a question a lot of players have asked and wondered why. And this is from Courtney Sweetman-Kirk. For me, in terms of the vision of the squad and where it is going, that was one of the contributing factors that I thought, if that is not part of the club's plans, then where is this club going? Why would you build a new facility and not create space for the women to train there when that's what most clubs are doing? If you're going to play at a smaller venue, okay, that's a different conversation. If you don't have a training stadium or whatever to play at, I get that. That's a little different. And reportedly, Tranmere's been great to them. They always were treated like it was their home for the Liverpool women. That's all fine. The training part is there's no excuse for that. You're building a new facility. You can carve out the space for the women. If you don't, then you don't care about it. So
right.
Again, I want to make it clear. I think people who have been saying that this should tarnish Liverpool's season this year, no, that's not true. It tarnishes the club, and it puts questions on the way the club is managed, but it doesn't take anything away from what the men have done this season. The men have had an incredible season. It's just, why would you even run a women's team like that? If you're not going to do it right, then don't do it. Just don't do it. Don't insult the women who are wearing your crest. Like, don't have them come along and make a big deal from a PR perspective about coming along on your summer tour and then make them take the bus and your men's team flies. Stuff like that. Don't do that. Don't have them train away. If you didn't have space at the old facility, okay, that's a valid argument. You're building a new facility. You could probably make the space work. Mm-hmm. If you're not going to do it right, don't do it.
Right.
Just don't do it. The way they're doing it right now, they're not doing it right. And that's a club issue. It's absolutely a club issue. It doesn't take anything away from Jurgen Klopp or the season he's had, but it is an issue for the club, for sure.
Yep. Putting a tail on your Newcastle story, The Independent, a group of 16 cross-party members of Parliament and peers have written to the government raising concerns over the threat of sports washing in the UK amidst the talk of the takeover.
Where were these concerns before?
Yeah.
Where were these concerns about a lot of different clubs and a lot of different owners that are already in place? Are you going to retroactively go back? That is an issue. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely an issue, but now you're going to draw the line.
Yeah.
Are you going to go back and handle other situations from the past? I don't think they will. I get it. I'm not arguing that it's not an issue. Don't understand me here. I'm arguing that I don't think they can justify that's the reason why they don't do this. The reason they can justify is the piracy. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing it for one reason, but you can't justify that reason, but you can justify another reason why you're doing it, you have two reasons why not to do this. One of them you can justify publicly and make it very clear that this is the case, and you can subtweet all you want about the rest of it, but you got to understand that you're going to look like a hypocrite if you pull it out now and say it is sports washing and we don't want that to happen. You're not going to look like a hypocrite if you come out and say piracy and the World Trade Organization is backing this up of one of our partners who's pumped over £1 billion into our leagues in the last 5 years. They're stealing what they're paying us a lot of money for. That's not okay. There's no hypocritical element to that. That's what you stand on. The rest of it is backup, and it's absolutely a valid reason, but it wasn't a valid reason before. Right. Piracy is 100% a valid reason. So,
yep. The politicians say that it is a vehicle to distract from the country's human rights record.
We know
You're
that.
saying it's now.
No, we know that. We know exactly what it is. That's the whole point. I mean, there's a lot of different owners in the league that you can bring that point up about. We know what the sports washing is. We know that element of it, but that's a different debate, and they've thought very differently on it in the past. The piracy issue, there's just You can't have that. You can't have that come into the league. And no, I don't think it's a win-win by bringing them in but saying, well, you have to get rid of this and you have to make sure you crack down on this. That's not solving all of the problem. You allowed it to happen to begin with.
Yep.
That's
championship fixtures are out, and Fulham and Brentford are going to lead things off. Broadcast details have been published. EFL announced 11 matches will be shown live on Sky across the next 3 rounds. 2 other games being shown in the weekend of the 20th and 21st of June. So all the fixtures are now out for the championship for their run-in.
We will see what happens with U.S. Soccer. They're expected to talk tomorrow about the kneeling ban. We could hear more about that later today as that news starts to spread. We'll keep you posted on everything else that's going on around the world as well. Toluca is reporting that 7 people tested positive between players and staff. The numbers in Mexico out of the gate have been higher than some of the others around the world, but it's all about what you do from here. If that's your baseline and they go down because you identify and you isolate, then the system is working as it should. But yeah, they've been a little bit higher. I don't know if Toluca had a goalkeeper who had a birthday party with a band and a bunch of people went and then got sick. Don't know. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. Santos did. But 7's a lot. But now how do you handle it going forward? There's been a lot of concerns about Mexico because they didn't really get this until later on, and they haven't really handled it very well. And are they going to have a huge outbreak of this? These early numbers from players and staff, they are higher than they were in Germany. They're higher than they were in England. They're higher than they were in Spain. I don't know if we've heard the initial testing numbers out of Italy yet from the clubs at this stage of it, not tests that happened before, but now. These are a little bit higher. You've got to handle it a little bit stronger, but yeah, we'll see how they go from here. And we'll keep an eye on that as well. We'll be back later today. Tonight, we got Jessica Charman joining us.
Okay.
We will have our 7 o'clock show with Jess, get caught up on what she's up to this week. She's got a high school scouting event this weekend that she'll be on the call for at Silverbacks Park. We'll get into all that, all the rest of the news that happens today. So 7 o'clock on the Twitch, on the app, on the website. You can join into the show. If you have any questions, go ahead and send them our way ahead of that. We'll get into it then. We'll be back tomorrow morning with the usual morning show. Y'all have a good rest of the day. Much plati, y'all.
Much plati, y'all.